So Core and Cluster is a model for crisis accommodation for victim survivors, women and children, leaving domestic and family violence. This is now seen as the best practice model, as it's a shift away from communal living within those settings. So the Core as such is where you have specialist support services. So in this procurement, that's specialist homelessness and domestic and family violence, as well as other sort of wraparound type services and communal spaces, meeting spaces, things like that. The cluster refers to the independent living spaces surrounding the Core. So in this procurement, there's a bit of a range that you could aim for, but that's, let's say, roughly 6 individual units to accommodate for women and children. The purpose of this is that these refuges are intended to be trauma-informed, everything from the design of the build to the design of the service delivery. This is purpose-built, consideration of the user experience should be considered throughout the process of building and running these services. Now, there have been pilot sites announced in regional New South Wales. You may have heard of the Orchard in Orange. There's some resources online, and we will provide those as well, so you can have a look at what they've done there.
So jumping into the procurement that is currently happening across the board. So in October last year, the state government announced $426 million worth of funding to deliver what is 75 to 80 core and cluster refuges across the state. These are the indicative locations for those refuges by district, and that funding has fallen into 3 tranches. Tranche 1 was for shovel ready. That has been and gone. That occurred in May to July this year. Tranche 2 occurred in August to October. The 24th of October, Tranche 2 RFT closed. And so we're now focusing on Tranche 3, which is planned for early 2023. And involved in that procurement is, or the delivery model of that procurement, there are 4 elements that you need to be across as an organisation when considering this tendering. So the first is land provision, the second is asset delivery, third asset maintenance or management, and fourth is service provision. So these are the 4 elements as an organisation that you need to be looking at when looking to apply for Tranche 3 funding, acknowledging that Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 have closed. So the land provision, that's acquiring land. You may already have land as an organisation. You may have a relationship with council where you can identify land. We do encourage you to connect with your local council around this component of the delivery model, as that can, they have land that they may be able to offer. We also want to, be clear with the land provision. If there is an existing building on that land, you are able to refurbish that building in the sense that it's not replacing an existing SHS funded service. So you cannot refurbish existing services that are on offer. This is new refuges and new beds on offer to the users and to people experiencing domestic family violence.
If I might just jump in really quick, because I know that there have been a lot of questions around, what do we do with existing refuges that aren't fit for purpose sometimes, and our communal living styles, and is this procurement looking to replace that? And the messaging that we've received back is that they're looking to add more beds, more refuges to the service sector. Now, within this funding, there's roughly 8 existing refuges that will be refurbished. That is a process that DCJ is working with LAC on to identify, so there's no application for that as we understand it. So unfortunately, we don't have any more information on that for you today. These applications are specifically for new builds or refurbishments of existing buildings, not DCJ-funded refuges, though.
And then jumping to the next 2 components of the asset. So one is the build, a capital build, and the next is the maintenance of that. So to be eligible to apply or to tender for this procurement, you need to be a Tier 1, Tier 2 or Tier 3 CHP, or be in the process of becoming a CHP. And then lastly is the service provision, and probably most importantly, is the service provision. And so that's where you've got your SHS, DFE specialisation, delivering those services once that refuge has been built as part of the procurement. And so in this model of delivery, it is likely that a lot of services will be partnering between the CHP and the SHS sectors and looking at partnership for this tender process. We can explain a bit more about our capacity building program in a moment as sector peaks, but we are very focused on ensuring that the sector has what they need to develop transparent, equitable, fair partnerships across their organisations or consortiums if you're looking at that, and have the tools and knowledge and information you need to really build transparency in that process from tendering to delivery, acknowledging that once you've got the tender you actually have to build the building and deliver on the services.
Now, before we jump into what we're doing around this, I just want to take this opportunity to note the key documents and resources, because we all know that looking online can be a bit of a scramble sometimes. So if you're looking at participating in the core and cluster procurement, the first thing you want to do is go to that DCJ website and look at their previous core and cluster discussion paper. DCJ had run sector consultations. What they heard back from the sector is then in that shaping the design and delivery of core and cluster, and I would say that's reflected in a lot of what we're hearing from the sector as well. And then you're also going to want to look at their fact sheets, so it'll tell you a bit about the refuge locations analysis. So that was on a slide that we had shown you earlier, and that shows you how many indicative locations they have in each district, as well as Aboriginal-led refuges to be built. The other thing you want to look at is the fact sheet for local councils. So we recognize that for a lot of organizations, getting your foot in the door with this procurement, the biggest challenge is that land provision component. And so we recognize a lot of people will need to work with their local councils to try and identify a parcel of land for this. That's a fact sheet developed by DCJ for local councils to really understand their role in this process and what core and cluster is. There's also a fact sheet on connecting with potential partners by registering interest. It's a bit of a long title. But the main thing with that is if you are looking at participating in the procurement, you want to put some key details from your organization down on that fact sheet and email it back to DCJ. And what you do is tick which of the 4 key components of the procurement you're looking to provide. So service delivery would be that, or if you do have land, service delivery and land, what have you. You'll send that back to DCJ and essentially get an Excel spreadsheet with all of the services in your local area who are looking to partner to participate in this procurement. So that's going to be one of your key resources for starting this process. And then the other fact sheet is around our capacity building program. Now, you can also still access the briefing sessions that DCJ had run for the Tranche 1 and Tranche 2 EOI. That's definitely worth looking at, the Tranche 2 in particular, because we expect that Tranche 3 will operate in a very similar way. So for those looking to participate in Tranche 3, look at Tranche 2 and what was required of that. And then, of course, keeping an eye on the e-tendering website in the new year, because that's when we expect Tranche 3 to open. Around asset design and delivery, everything needs to be aligned to the Domestic Violence Crisis Accommodation Functional Design Brief. We've continued to hear that feedback from DCJ. So if you're looking at participating in core and cluster, it needs to be aligned to that. Now, within that, they reference lacks good design for social housing, as well as the draft Connecting with Country framework that you should be referring to throughout that design and building process. The 2 key resources for service design and delivery is the DV New South Wales Good Practice Guidelines, which my colleague Sarah Judd is presenting on just after this, as we have a new edition dropping during the 16 days of activism, and the Special Homelessness Services Program specifications. So those are the 2 main resources. When you look at the e-tendering documentation, it's really going to outline exactly what is expected for that service design, and we're more than happy to meet with you one-on-one to talk through what that might look like for you and to help you get a better picture of what is in that core documentation.
So in terms of what we are doing as sector peaks, Homelessness New South Wales, Domestic Violence New South Wales and ACHIA are working very closely together to deliver a sector support program to give the sector the supports, resources, tools they need to consider readiness for core and cluster procurement and to participate. And so we are working very closely, as you can see, and meeting weekly with ACHIA's CEO to also work very closely with them. This program is prioritising ACOs, regional-based projects, and small organisations with revenue less than 5 mil each year, really seeking to not level the playing field so much, but just provide equity and resourcing across the board and ensure those smaller organisations and that prioritisation has everything they need. In terms of the program design and how we're doing this, we're doing a lot of sector engagement. So many familiar faces in the room. We've been across the state and have a couple of weeks to go in our sector engagement process. We've been delivering town hall forums, which is a community-style meeting, presenting very similar information. We're also arranging, as Claudia mentioned, those one-on-one consultations and meetings to really provide tailored support to an organisation's circumstances, acknowledging that this could, your organisation could be in a very different place to another organisation in this process. And so we really want to ensure that we're understanding that as peak bodies, and all of the information and feedback that we are receiving from that process is informing our capacity building initiatives. In our sector engagement as well, we have delivered a webinar for local council in partnership with Local Government New South Wales, just at the start of that work of really engaging council in this process, acknowledging that they not only may play a role in the land acquisition, but when you're coming to building and DAs, they play a very vital role. And so you can watch the recording of that webinar. It's available on Homelessness New South Wales' website, and really recommend that you share it with your local council if they're not already familiar with core and cluster, as this is a really tailored resource that they can watch and build that knowledge and information within the council. And so for our capacity building activities, so far we have delivered a Forming Effective Partnerships webinar, and that was in partnership with Connect Consulting to really focus on what a best practice partnership may look like for your organisation. What are the things to be considering when you're having those partnership conversations, acknowledging short timeframes as well, of trying to lessen the burden when you're bringing all of this together by giving a toolkit to support this webinar as well at the end of this month. And we will continue these capacity building activities across the next couple of months in preparation for Tranche 3. Do you want to talk about grants?
Yes, I do. Yeah. In partnership, we've got $500,000 worth of grants, and that's up to $20,000 per organization. If you do the math, that's not enough to cover everyone who would be applying for a core and cluster in this procurement. So we certainly encourage people to apply as soon as is practicable. So what we've done is we have done some ring fencing around Tranche 1, 2, and 3. If you applied in Tranche 1 or 2, you can apply for the grant for retrospective funding, or you can apply if you intend to participate in Tranche 3 before you actually put that application in. We're assessing these applications on a rolling basis every couple of weeks. We want to get that money out as quickly as we can so that you can participate in this process. So if you are planning on applying in Tranche 3, a couple of the key things you want to look at is having already identified your partner, because we will be looking at, genuine intent to apply, and that means having, all of the eligible organizations that you need around the table, as well as, say, a letter from the chair of your board, perhaps signed by your partners as well, demonstrating your intent to apply, and then obviously noting what you intend to use the funding for. But there is flexibility in that, whether it's for a tender writer, an architect, what have you. So we certainly encourage you to have a look at that. The grant guidelines and the application are on our website. Small organizations with less than 5 mil in annual revenue, as well as Aboriginal community-controlled organizations, will be prioritized in that process. And ACOs can also submit verbal applications as well.
And if you would like to arrange a one-on-one, please send us an email. We're really happy to, whether it's virtual or if we can do in person, depending on where you're located, we really want to be meeting with services and have this as a two-way conversation, which if you have attended or do attend a town hall forum, that's really where the difference is and the value is in having a two-way conversation with those in the room. It's not just us presenting in this format. So I would encourage you, if you haven't already and would like to and can attend one of those locations, to join us.